we're going to get started. If you're joining us, please turn on your mute. Pastor Hamilton is with us. He's going to be just his audio only because he's at the lake and his connection is a little sketchy. We're just grateful he's joining us. If you feel compelled, and whether you've worked out or not, and I could see your faces, that would really make my world. But however, you can also stay, oh, there you are. You go, girl. But you can also stay, whatever, keep your video, but I'd love to see your faces. So I wanted to, this is actually the second phase of the Rhythm and Resilience series. Back in, when this all started, I was listening and my spirit actually woke me up one morning and said, okay, we need to find a rhythm so that we could have resilience through this reset. And so I was like, okay. And so then it gave me a wellness plan that we've shared and we'll continue to share with you. And so then I invited some of my friends to help me, basically help me get through the month of April. And I invited you all to join in our conversations. And it has been fun. I've seen some of you almost every single day, the last 20 days of doing this series. We started out with Monday, Motivational, Tuesday, Total Health Tuesday, Wednesday, Wisdom, Thursday, Talk Story Thursday, and Fun Friday. So in the month of, for the first 3 weeks of May, not the whole month of May, but we're going to do Monday Motivational and Fun Friday, start to kind of shift a little bit back to some type of rhythm and normal. What I'm hearing from people as I've been on some corporate rhythm and resilience talks is that people are starting to find a new rhythm and they're kind of enjoying quarantine life a little bit. It's kind of like wanting to mow the yard. I don't mind mowing the yard unless I have to mow the yard. And so that's probably the same thing with quarantine life. And so we've had a wonderful month of hearing from some really wonderful souls. Those videos are all on YouTube, by the way. Since you're all registered, we're only dripping this out to the people that have registered for this content. And then after the series, after the day, you get an email that says, here's what we talked about, as well as a handout that Eleanor and Zach put together that gives you some of the quotes of the day, plus some of the resources. So I'm hoping that you're following some of the resources. Last Friday, we had on Meredith Suarez from Junior Achievement, and they launched their Getting People Moving campaign. And I actually signed up for that. So it's helped me get a couple extra 1,000 steps. So if you wonder why I'm walking so much, is I like a good competition. So we love supporting people. Well, today I'm privileged. I actually have to tell you, I've only met our guest once or twice, and it's usually been in a tragic situation today. And I had the courage, and one of my friends, Mindy Corcoran, connected us so that we get a chance to hear from this very wise man in Kansas City. I want to start with one of his quotes today because I think it's perfect as we're wrapping up the school year and thinking about our educators. Adam Hamilton said this: "I'm convinced many of America's heroes are public school teachers and administrators. Many of those people do what they do because of their faith." And Adam, I'm guessing you do what you do because of your faith, but Adam Hamilton is a senior pastor of the United Methodist Church of the Resurrection in Leawood, Kansas, one of the fastest growing, most highly visible churches in the country, not just in Kansas City. The church report named Hamilton's congregation the most influential mainline church in America, and he preached at the National Prayer Service as part of the presidential inauguration festivities in 2013. Pastor Hamilton is the best-selling and award-winning author of The Call, Making Sense of the Bible, several other books, and recently his book called Unafraid, which is a great topic for us to talk about in today's times. Pastor Adam, welcome to Rhythm and Resilience.
Michelle, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to turn on my video for just a second so those who are watching this later will actually know that I am a human being sitting in front of the screen. But I am at a place where I've got a satellite connection and the weather's bad and the video tends to eat it up. But it's great to be with you today. Thank you for the invitation to join you.
Well, thank you for being a rock in our community, not just during these times, many times. I've been to the Church of the Resurrection. I'm happy to say that I'm not happy to say, especially with you on the call, is that I'm not actually a member, but I do really enjoy your message. I think you're a wonderful leader. I love your Christmas service because I love that you give all the money away. And so thank you for doing that. Talk a little bit about what the word rhythm means to you during this time.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think So when I think of being out of rhythm, I have terrible rhythm. I can't clap to the beat of the music. I try to dance with my wife, and we took dancing lessons for several years, and I've actually gotten where it's a little better. But she says it would be helpful if you would just count your steps while you're dancing. You're one of those people who needs to do that. But I think being out of rhythm is when you feel disordered, disoriented, and being in rhythm is finding a way to I use the metaphor of dancing, to find a way to dance to the new music that we have today, to be able to adapt to what's going on. And when you're in rhythm, things go better than when you're stumbling over your feet or you're out of sync. And so I think a lot of us feel, though, because our world has changed, I think a lot of us feel disoriented right now, a little disordered. And so finding that rhythm, how do I do life now, is really important. And some people are starting to find that. And, if you're in a place where your income is still preserved and you're not scared about whether you're going to be able to provide food for yourself, and you're not scared that you might be getting sick because you're on the front lines, for a lot of people, this is kind of a nice rhythm that they're finding. There's anxiety that comes with it because it's different than normal. But, I was in Kansas City, I'm at the lake, right? I was in Kansas City over the weekend, and the last part of last weekend, seeing all the people riding their bicycles together or families walking together. And it's like, I'd never seen that on a Friday during the day before. And it's kind of there's a new rhythm to that. And there are some folks who, like, this is for me, we record our worship services on Friday and then we rebroadcast throughout the weekend. This is the first time since I was 14 years old that I had weekends off. And my wife's like, I could really get used to you being off on the weekends. I'm like, well, yeah, don't get too used to it. This is not going to go along, into the fall. But anyway, I think, and I appreciate what you're doing and trying to help people find the rhythm.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I have to totally be transparent. I can't clap or dance either. So I'm right there with you. And some people are laughing because they know that's true on this show here. It's interesting. You've really found your lane, though. When did you know that it was going to be your lane to minister?
Yeah, to be a pastor?
Yes, to be a pastor.
Yeah. Well, I felt called to that when I was 16, actually. And I went to this little church out in Stanley, South Overland Park. And I was very involved in the youth group and a leader in the church as a young person. And I had older adults come to me and say, "You're supposed to be a pastor someday." And I'm like, "No, I don't think so. I'm going to be a lawyer or a doctor or something else, but I don't have any ambitions of being a pastor." And after 2 or 3 of these, little older ladies came up to, at least they seemed like little older ladies then. I was 14 or 15. But then my pastor said, "I think you have the gifts for this. I think you should be thinking about this." And he asked me to preach one Sunday night as sort of it was Youth Sunday. And so I thought, well, how hard can that be? That sure, I'll give that a try. And I preached that weekend, and it was the most embarrassing, humiliating experience I had had up to that point in my life. It was a terrible sermon. I have an audio cassette tape of it somewhere, and no one will ever hear it. But when I was finished, I felt like, even though I was embarrassed, I felt like, I think this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. I think to help people and to help them grow in faith and to live out their faith in their daily lives. I think this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. And so I've felt that since I was 16, and I've never turned back. Went on to college and graduate school, and then have largely loved most of what I get to do. There's times that are hard and difficult, but largely I feel like this is what I was called to do.
What does the word faith mean to you?
I think of it as trust. I used to play this game with my children when they were small. We had a stairs right off the entryway, and then a hard ceramic tile floor in the entryway. And the kids when I would get home from work, they had this game they like to play called Flying Squirrel. And so I don't know which of them came up with it. I have 2 daughters, and they're 3 years apart. And they would say, "Daddy, flying squirrel, flying squirrel." And I'm like, okay. So they would crawl up the steps. They'd go up 3 steps, and then I would stand there, and they would dive headfirst into my arms. And then they'd go up a 4th step, and then a 5th step. And finally, about the 6th step, I'm like, "Your dad's back is not cut out for this, so you got to stop at 6." But they would throw themselves headfirst into my arms. And what they knew was, they knew 2 things. If they had fallen, they would have cracked their heads open. They would have been hurt. But they knew 2 things. They knew that their daddy loved them, and he was strong enough to catch them. And given that, they totally trusted. They had faith that they were safe. And I think that's how I think of faith. It of course has a component of believing certain things, but it is largely an experience of trust. And that's, right now at times like this. So my sermon Sunday, I've been doing this series on hope, and my sermon Sunday was, and really each of these weeks is about trusting that you're not alone, trusting that God is with you. That doesn't mean that everything's going to be, you're not going to get sick. It doesn't mean that you're not going to lose your job. It just means that no matter what happens, I'm not alone. And I just had my granddaughter with us this weekend. She's 6. And, she has this absolute trust that her papa loves her, and that it doesn't matter if it might be scary out with the storms or whatever, but if papa's nearby, somehow it's going to be okay. And I think that's how I think of faith or trust.
Well, prior to the series, I'm still doing it. I do a podcast called Small Changes, Big Shifts, Put the Odds in Your Favor. And we focus on celebrating, guiding, connecting, which provide hope. And so we're celebrating you in your church and what you've done, not only in Kansas City, but around the country. Just recently, I was on your Easter service and, feeding people, feeding the front line, celebrating the front line. And so once again, we're really celebrating you today. When you think about pre-COVID, what were the biggest concerns? What were you, because you do a lot of counseling, you guys are a pillar of our community. What was the biggest issues people were struggling with pre-COVID?
Yeah. It's interesting. In January, I had a sermon series planned for May. And in January, I had this nudge that you need to change the sermon series for April and May, post-Easter, to hope. And I was going to do this thing on how do we read the Bible and how do we make sense of its complex passages. But I just kept getting this sense you've got to turn this to hope. And so and part of that, I think, was because I think going into the election year, the election years are another disruptive thing that happens. It's like pulling off a scab off of our national, differences, the conflicts that we have. And so I think already we had, going into the election year, a sense of anxiety, fear. If it wasn't fear, it was just discord. And so I felt like there was a lot of that already in play. Anxiety is a regular part of our world today. And so, those are the kinds of things we often see. But of course, there's also marital conflicts. There are, suicide has been a big issue over the last few years. And we've had, in the last, I think 3 years now, we've had something like 35 suicide funerals at the church. And I think in the previous, so we've been around 30 years this fall. In the previous 27 years, we'd had 35 suicide funerals, and we had 35 suicide funerals in the last 3 years. Those weren't all members of our church. Sometimes they were children of members or family members or friends or something else, but half of them were members. And so that rising level of anxiety and sense of despair that some people have, that, it's not going to get better. And I'm going to continue to feel this way forever. And so we've dealt a lot with that as well. We've had a lot of work we've done in the area of suicide, trying to help people think carefully about this and how we help our friends. And so, I would say those are some of the kinds of things we were dealing with.
What do you feel like's top of mind right now? Have you seen a shift? Has there been less suicides the last 6 weeks?
We had a suicide from a young person, again, not a part of our congregation, but his parents are part of our congregation. He was, I think, 40, just a couple of weeks ago. And so I think we've had 2 during the last 2 months, which is less than some months and more than others. But I think what's happened is what people are already, our anxieties or our fears or the things that trouble us, depression or whatever it might be, when you go into a period where things are uncertain and there is additional stressors put on, it just elevates those concerns we already felt. And so I think people who are already struggling might have felt even more of whatever it was they were struggling with before. And that's part of why we've been focusing the last few weeks on hope and why we have hope and where we find hope, and to help sort of bring down the level of anxiety that people are feeling or disorientation, and to find once more a sort of, and this is the very thing you're doing, Michelle, I appreciate it, that we're all working to try to say, hey, it's going to be okay. We're going to make it through this. And here's why.
I'm thinking of the word nudge. And it's funny, I was talking with someone this morning talking about a nudge that I had to do certain things. And how do people learn how to listen to that nudge? And I call it God, wisdom,
Yeah,
spirit,
that's
whatever
good.
word you want to use.
Yeah. So I think this is really important as I tell our folks and Buddhist, the language comes from Buddhism, although I find it immersed throughout scripture, is this idea of paying attention. And when you pay attention, so often we have so much noise in our lives that we're not paying attention. We get in our car and we turn the stereo on, we get home and we turn on something. We're constantly are barraged by noise. But I think paying attention is really important. That has to do with sometimes tuning out the noise. It has to do with actually getting quiet and listening. It also has to do with learning to pay attention to the feelings, the intuitions, or the whispers. I love that story where Elijah the prophet goes to hear from God, and he goes out into the wilderness. He's really depressed, and he's praying that he will die. Actually, it's an interesting story. And he ends up in the wilderness at the mountain of God, and he hears the storm, and he thinks he can hear from God in the storm and the wind and the fire and none of these things. And it's finally that he gets quiet, and it's this still small voice, or this whisper, or this, the sound of dead silence, where he finally hears God. And I find, for me, I've learned I really have to pay attention to those nudges. And when I pay attention to them, I almost always find myself in the middle of some, we call them God moments, just this not coincidences, but God incidences. And so I try to teach our people to pay attention to that. And the language I give to this is the Holy Spirit speaking to us, God's Spirit trying to nudge us in the right direction, put us where we need to be. And I'll give you an example. This is a sort of dramatic one. I have a lot more mundane ones, but several years ago, I was speaking in Atlanta, Georgia. No, yes, it was Atlanta. And I had gotten off, I think it was Atlanta. I speak to so many places, I can't even remember now. But I got off the airplane, and there was somebody from another flight who had had a heart attack. And the medics had him on there in the airport, and they were working on him. And I walked by, and I thought I should pray for this person, and of course I couldn't get close, but I just stretched out my hands and I prayed for them. And then I left to go into town, to get a car and go into town. As I was walking through the airport, I heard this nudge, say, you need to go back. And I learned to pay attention to that. So I went back, and they were still working on this person. They were still trying CPR. I mean, it only got, 2 minutes down the walkway. And I asked one of the police officers, I don't know why, but I'm a pastor. Can I do anything? Can I pray for this person? No, you just need to stand back. So I just stood back, and I stood there, and I never felt like I should leave, so I kept standing there, and I kept praying for this person. And eventually they passed, and they gave up, they stopped. And so I left. I thought, okay, I don't know why I was there, but I stayed and prayed. And sometimes you don't know, am I really hearing a nudge from God, or is it just my imagination? And so, but I try to trust that. Anyway, I spoke, I went back to Kansas City, and then that Sunday I was speaking, I preached, and after church, I felt this nudge to go stand at one of the doors where I never stand. I don't know why. I just thought, I haven't stood there in a long time. It was one of the smaller doors in our old sanctuary. So I'm standing there, and one of our members walked by, and I said, hey, how are you today? And he said, yeah, it's been a hard week. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. What happened? His name was Rick. So what's the matter, Rick? And he said, my dad died this week. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, what happened? He said, well, he was in the airport in Atlanta. He had a heart attack, and they tried to save him, but they couldn't save him. And I just kept thinking, when I heard this, I wished I could have been there with my dad. I wished I could have been there with my dad. And I said, Rick, you won't believe this, but I was there with your dad. I asked what day was it and what time. He told me. I said, Rick, I got off my plane, and I saw somebody lying there, and I felt this nudge to go back and to stand there and pray. And I prayed until they stopped, and I just prayed for God to hold him. And I said, I think God wanted me to be there so that you'd know your dad was okay. It's just one of those kind of experiences that you could either say it's a total coincidence, and even if it was a total coincidence, the nudge to stay there and to go back when I was walking away. And I have hundreds of stories like that, of times where I just paid attention, but I also have stories where I didn't pay attention. Like one time I was driving down the road, and there was a guy who I knew I needed to go see in the hospital. And I thought, you know what, I'll just go see him tomorrow morning. And I just kept feeling like, you should go see him. But I was tired, and I had a million other things to get done. And so I went on home, and I got a call about an hour later that the man died at the hospital. And I thought, I knew I should have gone and I didn't pay attention to that. And I don't think God's angry with us when we don't pay attention to that. I just think I missed this chance to be with this person when he needed me. So it's those kind of things that have taught me, just pay attention to the nudges, the whispers, the thought that comes across your mind, or the feeling you have in your gut that you need to do something.
Have you read that book, When God Winks?
I have not read it, no.
Well, it sounds like you had a God wink there.
Is that?
Yes. And one of my mentors, Dr. Tom Hill, talks about that book a lot. And it is really just paying attention. For me, first of all, when you were telling that story, Adam, and a lot of people that have been following this series with me, part of when I know it's really the truth is I feel this goose bubbles right down my left shoulder. And I know to pay attention when I feel that, because that is my spirit just saying, yes, that's it, Michelle, or go get this or whatever. So I want to tell you that this whole side right now is still even more, it lit up more when I affirmed you did that. So thank you for listening. I want to also, I want to give a shout out and thank Mindy Corcoran, who might be catching the show today. She's driving to Kansas City, that connected us. I met some of your team of the night of Mindy's loss of the tragedy of her family. I was actually at a friend's house getting a massage, and they said to me, I don't know what's going on, but your phone's been blowing up. And I got off the massage table and had heard about, saw that something was going on, and literally grabbed, I think of some turkey jerky or something, threw on a hat and drove to Mindy's mom's house, because we're part of the Women Who Means Business. But watching the way that your team has guided so many people through tragedy in Kansas City. Once again, I'm getting that again. First of all, the courage your team has had. We all celebrate you for doing that. And this is a great time for the people that are on the show. This is a great time to ask your questions in the chat section. We'll be monitoring that. And then any love that you want to share this is a good time to do that as well, as we start to turn the conversation. So Adam, how do you reconcile with, I guess, I want to use the word evil, but it doesn't really sound right, but it probably is evil, with something like happened to Mindy's family?
Right. So thank you for your affirming words. And we do have an amazing team, a congregational care team at all of our campuses. We have 5 campuses throughout Kansas City, and each one caring for people, and part of that is we look at Jesus. He spent most of his time, with people who are broken and just trying to bring healing. And we don't have the, ability to miraculously make people see who are blind, or, raise the dead, but we have the ability to care for people and to embody love. And I think that's what we're all called to do. So the problem of suffering, or the problem of evil, is a serious problem. Theologians talk about it as theodicy. So theo from the Greek for God, dike for justice. How do we reconcile the idea of a good and loving God with the injustice we see in the world around us? I wrote a little book on this several years ago called Why, and it's been used across the country. Actually, it's been translated in multiple languages, and as an attempt to try to help people think through this. So for me, I look at this and I think, you go to the beginning of the Bible and you find the story of, Adam and Eve. And I take that as an archetypal story. It's telling us about ourselves, and God entrusted this planet to them, to human beings. God entrusted this planet to us, and he gave us freedom. And that freedom, the story of the eating the forbidden fruit, is all a story about, we know the right thing to do. And then at the same time, there's something in, something that the talking serpent, wooing us to do what we know we shouldn't do. And that voice I hear in myself too, the tendency to do the thing, to whether it's to get mad at my wife over some stupid little thing and get irritated, or be impatient, or to do things that are just totally wrong, and so that's a part of human existence. We all have to make those choices as to whether we do good or evil. You've got people. So at Bill and Reed's funeral, I preached from a text in the New Testament, but I talked first about the men who had taken their lives. And, this man had listened to tapes for years, tapes in his head that reinforced a hateful narrative about life, a dark narrative about life and about certain people, and in particular about the Jewish people. And that's unfortunately a part of the world that we live in, is that we can tell ourselves stories, we can listen to horrible, hate-filled things. We can succumb to that evil, and that's exactly what this person did. And so when I look at those kind of things, I don't think this was God's will. I don't think it's what God wanted to have happen. It wasn't because God wanted to teach Mindy something. It wasn't because God was punishing the family. It was because a human being listened to the wrong voice and kept listening to it over and over and over again, and then acted upon it. And there's a whole host of other things that are a part of that as well. Somebody who was willing to buy a gun for him at Walmart is a straw man purchase, and a whole host of things that should never have happened. And so what I think is not that God's role is to prevent evil from happening in our world. That to do that would mean that none of us are human anymore. We wouldn't have the freedom to make decisions. We make decisions every day that are, to do the right thing or to do the less right thing or to do the totally wrong thing. I think God's role is to say, I'm going to walk with you through the hell that you create for yourselves, and I'm going to love you through it, and I'm going to redeem it, and I'm going to force something good to come from it. And I love Dr. King once said this after a bombing at the 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 little girls were killed going to Sunday school. And he talked about at the funeral for 3 of them, how God wrings from evil good. Or if you think of another metaphor you use sometimes as a bar of steel that God forces or bends to accomplish good. And that's that redemptive work of God, that God redeems suffering. And so often the most painful things in our lives end up being the most pivotal moments in our lives, not because God wanted them to happen, but because God forced something good to come from them. And I see that in Mindy. I mean, in all the things that Mindy has done, and, her faith always wins, and the 7 days to the ripple effect of kindness, and all of this are part of that redemptive work that God does in our world. But I don't think God intends those evil things. I think just the opposite. In fact, I wrote a book on the 10 Commandments, and I was talking about one of our other pastors. His daughter was murdered at downtown last year at the First Fridays event. She was, Erin Langhofer is her name, and I have this chapter on thou shalt not kill. And there were people who would say things after Erin died, like, well, it must have been the will of God. It must have been her time. God's got a plan. And my response to that is, no, that wasn't the will of God. It wasn't her time. It wasn't what God wanted to have happen. It was 2 young people had guns and got a fight, and one of them pulled the gun and started shooting. This was not God's will. And when you get to the 6th commandment, which is you shall not kill, it's pretty clear God doesn't want us to do that. And so anyway, I could go on for quite a long time on this one issue, but I'll stop there.
Well, thank you for honoring Erin. Erin's aunt's one of my best friends, and I saw Erin that week, and know the family very well. I'm sitting here thinking, and this is embarrassing to say, but I'm going to be totally authentic, which I think gives you a magical life, is I've been in your church probably more times for funerals than I have. I've listened to the sermons online, but I kind of like the intimacy. But I'm sitting here thinking, I've been for that person. I've been in your church many times for funerals. So you must have a lot of congregants, which I know you do. I want to talk about the tapes, because COVID, I'm going to shift the conversation to COVID a little bit. People have the tapes going off in their head right now, the fear and what's this look like. How do you transform your tapes, or how do you teach people to transform the tapes and then flip it to COVID tapes?
Yeah, sure. So I wrote a little book called Unafraid a couple years ago, and about a year and a half ago. And there's one little, what do you call, acronym that I have in here that I've taught my congregation over and over again. And I run it through. The book has, a whole host of different areas of fear, and fear is actually a gift, right? It's a gift from God. It helps us survive. It's the fight or flight mechanism. It is it is a motivating factor. It's a blessing. It's a gift. The problem is, of course, that with our fear comes our imagination, and our imagination allows us to imagine the worst possible thing that could happen. And then we catastrophize, right? So we begin to think that that's probably going to happen to me. And so we've got to counterbalance the good work that fear does in our body and the imagination we have to imagine what possible dangers are out there. We have to counterbalance that with our cognitive abilities. And so anyway, I give this force. I used fear as an acronym for how we deal with fear. And the 4 pieces of that were: face your fears with a bias of hope, examine your assumptions in the light of the facts, attack your anxieties with action, and release your cares to God. And so if you unpack those, face your fears with a bias of hope, it takes as much imagination for me to imagine the worst possible thing could happen as it does to imagine the best possible thing could happen. And I think about, the difference between hope and despair as a verb is with hope, I am choosing to believe that the future will not be as bad as the present. And with despair, I am choosing to believe that the future will be as bad, if not worse, than the present. So I'm making a choice. I'm flipping a switch to say, I'm choosing to believe that, and I'm going to keep telling myself that and get myself really good and scared. Or I'm going to choose to believe that, you know what, this is going to go away. It's going to be in this time frame. I'm choosing to believe that. I have enough facts to back that up. So, it's deciding. And, you think about getting on an airplane for the first time. I've been on planes sitting next to people who were flying for the very first time in their life. And they had to decide, this plane is probably going to crash like those other planes I've heard of that have crashed. Or they've done the homework to say, it's safer to ride on an airplane than it is to drive in your car. And so it's, which of those two narratives am I going to latch onto? It's easier said than done. But anyway, facing your fears with a bias of hope. The second, examine your assumptions in the light of the facts. So I've shared this with our congregation several times. If you do the statistics on COVID-19 and you look to see what's the likelihood of dying from COVID-19, you have a 99.97% chance of not dying from COVID-19. So if the weatherman said, tomorrow you have a 99.97% chance of it being sunny and 80, are you going to wear your heavy coat and take your umbrella with you? And you're probably not, because the chances of it being rainy and being cold are really so small. So when we look at COVID-19, part of what we do is, of course we want to recognize how serious the spread of this is. And, we want to be really careful. And so we're smart. We're not holding public worship services right now, and we won't for some time. But the facts would tell us I don't have to be as afraid of that as what it seems. But the problem is every news story is about COVID-19 and people are dying from this. I mean, everywhere you turn, everything you're hearing. And so one of the things we've said is we just don't turn on the news more than twice a day. We're going to watch twice a day, and then we're not going to watch the rest of the day, because I don't need to hear about COVID-19 24/7. I just need to hear about it twice during that day. It's not going to change anything between then. And then balancing all of that with the facts. So examine your assumptions in light of the facts. Attack your anxieties with action. Fear in your body is meant to move you to do something. So when we don't do anything and we just chew on it, we just let it ruminate, it makes us more and more afraid. As opposed to, if we do something with our fear, if we act upon it, then we find we're less fearful. So that may mean, when it comes to COVID-19, making sure I have hand sanitizer and I've got masks that I'm going to wear when I'm going out, if that's the thing. Or it may be, hey, I need to exercise. I mean, a lot of the things, Michelle, you've been teaching people and talking about. So I need to exercise. I need to call other people, or, whatever it might be, but doing something helps us deal with our anxiety. And one of the things I think is really important is doing something for other people. So I've really tried to focus our congregation on how are we going to serve other people? How do we help, how can we encourage nurses? How can we encourage doctors, or working in the hospitals or whatever? So focusing people on doing something for other people takes your eyes off yourself. And it's amazing how much that, what that does for fear. And the last is, from a faith perspective, the last is releasing your cares to God. And so, I tell our congregation, and I do this every morning. I wake up, I get on my knees, and I just say, God, I belong to you. I don't know how long I'm going to live. I might have a heart attack today. I've buried enough people who died in car accidents or had heart attacks. I have today, but my life belongs to you. So I entrust who I am to you. And it's interesting, Jesus from the cross, one of his 7 last words was a prayer from Psalm 34, 31, I can't remember which now. Into your hands I commit my spirit. And it was a prayer that Jewish mothers taught their children to pray before they went to bed at night. And his mother standing at the cross, and he prays this from the cross, into your hands I commit my spirit. And I've taught our congregation, it's a great little breath prayer to pray, into your hands I commit my spirit. Or finding some other little breath prayer. It can be, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. I mean, just one little line in which I say it again and again to God, and I find it just brings peace. So anyway, that's a thumbnail sketch of what that fear acronym looks like to combat fear.
Well, I love acronyms, so thank you very much for sharing that. And this is a great time, and I'm going to get to your question here in just a second, Lisa. But I want to, this is a great time if you have any more questions. So Adam, when I was doing some different healing work in the first part of March into February with one of my friends actually out by your church cookie, she gave me a new prayer because I felt something shifting. I felt something stirring in my soul, and who knew it was going to be COVID. And it goes like this: Mother, Father, God, choose me. And then I add other words to that: choose me, however, whatever. Mother, Father, God, use me. Mother, Father, God, move me. So choose me, basically put me in, coach, and then use me for your greatest good. And then move me, make sure I'm moving. So I wanted to share that. We maybe shared that once during this last month, but it's been something that has become a staple for me. And it came to me the first part of March, end of February. It has been such a solace to my soul. Lisa has a question. What are the top 3 things on your prayer list?
Yeah, so I'll mention 5 things that I do when I pray. So, and I don't do these every time, but most of the time. I start with praise, just, praising God for the beauty of the earth or for who God is and God's nature and character. And then I move to Thanksgiving. So I always spend time just recounting at least 3 or 4 things that I'm thankful for every time I pray. And I'll pray throughout the day, I don't know, 8 or 9 times usually, at minimum 5 times. And so Thanksgiving becomes a really important part of that. And I try to think about different things to be thankful for every day. And that, we all know gratitude plays a really key role in mental health and wellness, and I think in our spiritual lives. The third is that I ask for forgiveness. So God, I'm so sorry for that way that I acted, or that thing that I did, or how I didn't act and I didn't do what I should have done to help somebody else or to care. So always there's a, forgive me, Lord, for whether it's thoughts, words, or deeds, what I did or what I failed to do. And then I pray for other people. So if I'm thinking about my left hand, I get to the 4th finger, and that's my ring finger. And so I start by praying for my wife, and then I pray for my children. And I pray for people that I know who are sick, or people who are in need at any particular moment that I'm aware of. And there may be, I might have 4 or 5 people that are on the prayer list, on my prayer list on any given day. And usually I don't feel like that's so much about telling God what God doesn't already know and asking God to do what God doesn't want to do. In part, it's relieving this, it's sort of putting this in God's hands where I'm not worrying about my children on any given day or whatever it is. And praying for them doesn't mean I don't think anything bad's going to happen to them. I've done enough funerals for people who died in car accidents to know that that's not necessarily the case, but I'm naming them before God. And I think on that one, Leslie Weatherhead, he was a British preacher in the last century. He once talked about prayer as, and I don't know what I think about this exactly, but somehow it's conveying part of your energy, part of your soul energy to someone else. It's giving part of that to them. And I remember some years ago, I had a guy who was dying of cancer, and I would, at night, I would lay flat on my face on the floor in my bedroom before I go to bed, and I would pray for him, and I would just ask God, give him strength. And again, this may sound kooky to some of you, I don't know, but on those mornings when I called him when I had done that, he seemed to have better nights the previous night. And when I'd forget, I'd call him and he'd been throwing up through the night or something else. And it may have been coincidence, or it may have been the fact that somehow, and I don't think it was my lying on the floor convinced God to be kind to him. I think it was somehow it was conveying some strength to him. So anyway, that's the 4th thing, is praying for other people. And the last one is along the lines of what you just shared, Michelle, and that is, it's yielding. It's like, here I am, Lord, send me, guide me, help me to pay attention, use me however you want. So those 5 things: praise, thanksgiving, confession, praying for other people, and yielding myself to God. Those are the 5 patterns of my prayer most of the time.
Well, I don't know about all of you, but I am just loving the wisdom that we're getting today, and the motivation, since it is Monday motivational. By the way, Dr. White, great to see you on the show today. Hi. Wow, there's so much to unpack in this conversation. I'd love to hear how you guys want to celebrate Adam today. For those of you that are on their show, we'd love to wrap up with that. So I'm wondering, for me, I reach out to friends like yourself, wise people that I listen to for guidance, A, for myself and my own well-being and my spiritual well-being, and then B, to make sure that I feel clear about the guidance I'm giving. I feel like as a practitioner, as a doctor, that we cannot take our guidance lightly. And so what guidance have you been getting from your tribe?
Well, so I want to just say a word of think. Wisdom is learned, it's knowledge gained from experience. And so we have seen this happen. And because we've seen it happen enough times, we know that is how it works. That's how life works. At least that's one definition of wisdom. And one of the blessings I have is to get to listen to people's stories. And over the course of 30 years of being pastor at Church of the Resurrection, I find I gain a lot by listening and by hearing what happened in people's lives, and then trying to sort of systematize that or incorporate that into understanding how the world works. And so I spend a lot of time listening to people, and one of the things that I do is, part of that's my staff. So listening to my staff and hearing, what are you hearing? What's happening? In your ministry circles, it's listening to people when I'm sitting down, and I don't get to, right now, I'm not getting to sit person to person with anybody. So it's all email or, Zoom calls or whatever. But it's also, I'll even use Facebook, largely Facebook, where I'll ask people, hey, here's a question I have. Tell me what you think about this. And you can private message me, share with me your stories privately, or if you'd like to share on the wall. And, there'll be times I'll get a handful of responses, 10 or 15. Sometimes last week it was a question just about, when will you feel comfortable coming back to church? And I had like 450 people, wrote their responses. Then, sometimes we'll even survey people just to find out, what are people feeling? What are they thinking? And that helps me shape my sermons, in the future. When you're with people, you're learning things, you're listening, you're paying attention, and it's shaping how the advice that you give to other people. Because there's a lot of things I haven't experienced in life, but I've been with a lot of people who have experienced those things, and I can share a little bit of what I learned by listening to them. And so I think listening and paying attention to people's lives is really important. Reading is also helpful when you're reading people's stories and what happened in their lives. So that'd be my answer, I think.
You mentioned, by the way, we're starting to wrap up. So I just want to give people a heads up that want to share love with you. You mentioned that your wife is very grateful that you've had weekends off. So that's a gift of quarantine life. With Ron Hall and his wife, Beth, he was the author, same kind of different as me. And they call it quarantine present. It's been a good sentence, is what they say. We had a guest, Sonia Choquette, on last week, who said that she's having a 5-star experience because her daughter's feeding her every day. Wonderful meals. And so what's some of the gifts you've been getting?
Well, I think, again, the weekends off have been great. And part of the challenge up to this point is I had 2 book manuscripts that were due last year, and a whole lot of circumstances led them to kind of coalesce in not getting finished until the last 2 months. And I write my books on my day off and at night and when I take vacation. And so already my schedule was pretty full. So when quarantine happened, I was still working my full-time job, but it gave me more time, especially having the weekends off. So now I just finished those manuscripts last week, and LaVon's like, finally, I'm going to have some extra time with you now. And so there's a part of me that's like, I want this to be over, and I don't want people getting sick, but I could use a few more weeks of quarantine actually. But it's been a blessing. All of the work that I can do now is by Zoom, except when I'm preaching. And so I'm able to do that at the lake. We have a place at the Lake of the Ozarks where I have an office set up. I'm sitting in my home office right now here, and I'm looking out at the lake right now. I'm looking out through trees and at the water. That is just renewing for me when I'm sitting here working, as opposed to sitting in my office at the church, taking walks and praying. It's, again, spending time with LaVon. My daughter and granddaughter came down to the lake this weekend. And so because I had Saturday and Sunday off, I took my 6-year-old granddaughter, and we went for a nature walk, and we went looking for nature, and we would collect it and take pictures of it and celebrate it. And it was just like, this is just so awesome, whereas I would be stressed out on Saturday, usually getting ready for preaching 5 services over the weekend. So there's been a lot of wonderful things. And I also think we've learned, so my June sermon series is going to be called Restart, and it's on how are we restarting our lives differently, so that we've learned from this. And we're all asking those questions, like, what can I learn from this, and how can I do things differently in the future? And I just think there's a lot of things I hope I do differently after this is over with, and maybe not cramming so much into my life and having a little more time to be able to just be and not constantly be doing something. So I think it's been good. We don't eat out. We're eating at home, as all of you all are. We might carry out and bring it home, but, just LaVon and I having every meal together, breakfast, lunch, and dinner has been pretty awesome. And So a lot of good stuff, I think, that's happened in the middle of this.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm kind of with you. I'm like, oh, let's stay on it a couple more weeks. And I actually spent the first few weeks in the office trying to figure out what to do. And I was watching too much news and was really not in a rhythm. And then I had the fear of getting COVID, the fear of bringing home COVID to Crystal, the fear of giving it to my patients unknowingly, and then the stress of deciding what to do with your team as you watch your wellness business do this. I also had lots of faith through it, but you have to make decisions and they're stressful. And so I took almost 3 weeks out of the office and went to the lake for 10 days and created this series called Rhythm and Resilience, which has been so much fun this month. And we've got some people that have been on here almost every day. And so I'm with you on that. And nothing like having your calendar wiped clean. And then what do you put back on it? I'm keeping a little stickum by my desk, and I'm writing down pearls of this COVID-19. And one of them is making the time count. And you sure have made our time count today, without a doubt. Oh my goodness. If you're not jamming on this, been in tears half the conversation trying to make sure that I can talk to you. And that's the calming presence you have. You were right. The people that told you at the age of 16 that this was your destiny, just like someone told me that being a chiropractor was my destiny. And it takes you a minute to really bump along, but I'm going to tell you, I'm actually about tears sharing that. So I've got a question that I want to share some love with you. I think I probably have the answer to this, but what do you think your medicine is for the world? Because we all have our medicine that we can give to the world. What's your medicine?
Yeah, that's a great question. It kind of varies. So I think right now what I'm trying to give to the world is hope, in every sermon and every encounter that I'm having with people is hope. I would like to think that I want to give kindness and I want to encourage people. I think I try to inspire people towards doing acts of kindness and towards living a little more selflessly than they might have otherwise. I think that I think I have a gift for, trying to encourage people to live their life in a way that's towards others and not towards self and towards God. And I feel most alive when I'm having a chance to do that. I love encouraging people and having them go out and say, I feel better and stronger and more equipped to go do the kinds of things we were made for as human beings. And so I love that. And I want to say this to all of you. And I see some folks on here, some names on here, and some folks on here that I recognize. There's nothing really remarkably special about, I am glad I have certain gifts to be able to do certain things. Every one of us has special gifts to be able to do certain things. We all have the ability to encourage other people or to give hope to other people or to help other people feel loved. I mean, that's just, and we feel most alive when we've actually positively impacted somebody else's life. And so I know that the kind of people who join a call like this are the kind of people who are already doing that. And I just want to commend you and say, keep up what you're doing, that you're looking at. How can if you could make a list and say, what are 3 things I could do today before I go to bed to encourage other people? You'd probably find every day, thank you, LaVon, every day a gift. And so I'm again, just happy to be here with you all, knowing you're already the kind of people who are doing that.
I'm glad you brought up that word encouraging. I have this saying that I share with my clients that if I quit encouraging you, you could put what other word you want there, bossing you around, whatever, teaching. But if I quit encouraging, you need to fire me because I quit caring. And so definitely, like I said, I'm not sure there's been somebody in our community that has done as much good as you and your church have done. And so thank you for that. We're celebrating you. You've given us some wonderful guidance today. People can connect with you. I know Eleanor had put something about your book, Unafraid. For those of you that are actually new to the call today, you'll get a follow-up email that will give you a copy of this for you to listen to again. There's so many nuggets here, so many pearls. And there'd also be a one sheet that will have a few of the quotes and some of the links so that you could tap into some of the resources. And I would encourage you, if you're looking for someone to inspire you, I would encourage you to listen to the downloaded versions and maybe join the church if you're looking for a church community. So I would encourage you to do that. Adam, what have I not asked you that you wanted to share today?
I can't think of anything. You've asked such great questions. I was really, I usually I go into interviews and I have no idea whether the interviewer is going to be, whether they will have done their homework, whether whether I'm going to get questions that I'm totally stumped by. But instead, your questions are really thoughtful, and I so appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's part of the gift of doing one-on-one, hearing people's stories for the last 28 years. I know people want questions. I'm like, I don't know all the questions until I hear you. And when I hear you, it's like my little nudge goes, oh, well, go down that path. So thank you for trusting me not to send you questions. I know that's a big deal. And I appreciate when I don't get questions, because I don't have homework to do, which is nice. For our listeners, here's what's happening.
That's true.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I don't have to do any homework. I just have to show up and be myself, which is such a gift. I want to remind our listeners, here's the week. This is our first week that we're just doing Monday, Friday. So we did Motivational Monday today. And if you're not motivated today, I need you to come in so we can make sure you get a pulse, or we need to get Dr. White here to make sure you have a pulse. Friday, we'll have Kristen Bruce on. Kristen's just a wonderful jewel, young person, lives in Nashville. She will share a lot of fun stuff with her. She's got a powerful journey, also one of listening to Spirit. So we'll be doing that. And then we'll have the next Monday, Fridays as well. We've got some great guests lined up for you. And then the week of, and I know some people voted on this last week, in the week of Memorial Day, we're going to shift, and I'm going to start doing my podcast live on Wednesday, Wisdom Wednesdays. And so it'll be live, and then we'll change the dates. So my podcast coming out on Sundays, it'll come out on Wednesdays. Based on watching your faces, I have loved that. And I don't really like now, it's something different to talk to a name versus talking to faces and energy. So that'll be where we go forward. You'll be hearing all that. If you've heard something today that you think that you have somebody that you can share some hope with, I would encourage you to share this message with them. No pressure. I want it to really feel a tug in your heart, or that nudge that Pastor Adam talked about earlier. Adam, I want to share with you I do have some notes, by the way, just in case you want to know. I actually take a few notes of what you say that makes me nudge. I've asked you maybe 2 questions that I had written down, but one of the questions that I always like to end with is how you inspire me. And before I do that, I want to share how you've inspired our people today. Miriam said, thank you for speaking to us today. Adam, as part of the Jewish community, I appreciate your collaboration with us. You are a true gift to Kansas City. Chris says you are a gem, a teacher, and a healer. Lisa, you're amazing. And she thanked me for guiding you through the interview today. Dorothy, she's a member of CORE. She's been on almost every show we've done the last 20 days. And that she misses the fellowship. She's in the orchestra. And she says, you're so wise. And this word is so true. I'm glad you use this word, Dorothy. So comforting. Your voice is comforting. The words you say are comforting. I think like I said, I've witnessed that because I've been at several celebrations of lives at your place. Liz, beautiful fear acronym. Thanks for the conversation today. Amy said that she was at CORE, and hopefully you can see this note, but she was led to go to the sanctuary, and you were there and you prayed with her. And that was the first time that she was at your church, I believe, or right after she started reading the Bible. Let me just scroll through these again. The good news is I've got to scroll because you guys have been so generous with your love today. Lisa, you're amazing once again. I'm grateful for the moments today. Beyond grateful for my church, really proud. Pam says that. Eleanor, thank you so much. You are well studied and affirming. I feel your humility and relationship with God. Thank you for your time. Mary Beth, Pastor Adam is my pastor. He's a very special gift to the ability to help each of us believe God's deep love in us. So you inspire me by watching your generosity. And I saw a show on Oprah years ago. And oddly enough, right before we got locked down on COVID, I got the experience to go hear Oprah in Denver. And that was the last time I've been on a plane. But Oprah talked about, if you look to people that you admire and you look at their qualities, that's what you value in life. And the number one quality I value is generosity. And so, as I mentioned to you, being at your church and hearing the Easter service and being called to action and for the way you generously give. So that's one way you inspire me. Inspire me that you have the courage to show up after tragedy, time after time after time again. And the courage that you continue to listen to the Holy Spirit work through you, and the way you have really helped this community heal on so many levels. So that's how you inspire me. To all of you, thank you for showing up today for this wonderful conversation. Hey, we've got this. God's got this. Adam, thank you very much.
That's right. Thank you so much. It was a joy to be with you all, and thanks you for your kind words. You've left me very encouraged today, so thank you.
All right, everybody, go out and help other people. Do those 3 things and encourage people. Blessings to all of you. See you Friday.